So part 3 of our discussion of categorical data will entail how to visualize categorical data. We will talk in main about using bar graphs and what are called mosaic plots for examining categorical variables. So when we talk about two categorical variables, we can think of different bar graphs, both dodged and stacked bar graphs. These are ways of visualizing two categorical variables. The bars are either dodged or stacked according to one variable or another variable. Bar graphs can be used to display relative frequencies, that is proportions or percentages, but for this course we will focus on bar graphs of counts or frequencies. So this is our contingency table of counts or frequencies. You can see that the total number of people on the Titanic is a little bit over 1,000 for this particular data set. And then we have the total counts for those in the lower, middle, and upper class, and we have the total counts for those in the survival group versus those who didn't survive. And then we have the cells of this contingency table, which are the different counts for each of the cross-tabulation of values. So, for example, we have 369 people who were in the lower class and who did not survive. And then we have 131 people who survived and were in the lower class. So a contingency table of counts, we can think of graphing the marginal or unconditional distributions using a simple bar graph, which we've already talked about. So for example, right here, we're showing a bar graph of the unconditional distribution of those who survived. So the first bar shows 618 people who did not survive overall, and overall 427 people did in fact survive. And then we also have the unconditional distribution for class, whether you're lower, middle, or upper. So overall, 500 people are in the lower class, 261 are in the middle class, and 284 are in the upper class. And that's shown by this bar graph. So we can create bar graphs of frequencies or counts for the unconditional distributions. But the question is, in the contingency table, we have these cells in the middle that reflect the cross-tabulation of the different values for categorical variables. How do we graph these frequencies, these counts? Well, the solution is one way to create bar graphs that are either dodged or stacked. So let's look at a dodged bar graph. This is a bar graph in which we're looking at those who survived, and then so we're chunking the data into those who survived and those who didn't survive, and then among those who didn't or did survive, we're looking at the counts for whether you're in the lower, middle, or upper class. And we call this dodged because the actual bars are compressed next to each other, but they're dodged, they're side by side. So I have the frequency table for those in the upper, lower, and middle class, and those who did and did not survive from our Titanic data set. And you can see that all we're doing is we're just representing the cells here. So we have 6 cells and we have 6 bars. We're just grouping the bars based on whether you're in the survival group versus the group that didn't survive. And so you can see that looking at these cells, we have different heights, and we can see that most people in our data set are those in the group who did not survive and those who are in the lower class. That's the highest bar out of these cells. But you can also look at a different sort of way of creating a dodged bar graph. Instead of grouping by whether or not you survived, you can group the cells based on whether you're in the lower, middle, or upper class. This is the same kind of graph as before. The heights of the bars are the same. We're just orienting whether or not we're looking at the survival group first or the class group. So in this case, we're just chunking our data into whether you're in the lower, middle, or upper class. Then within each of those levels or categories, we're looking at whether you survived or didn't survive. It's just a slightly different way of looking at the data, but all we're doing is we're just representing the counts or frequencies in the cells of a 2x2 table, in a contingency table. And the heights of the bars, they still just mean, they still represent the number of counts for each of those cross-tabulations. So for example, the height of the number of people in the lower class and those who didn't survive, it's still the highest bar. It's still the most number of observations are in that particular cell. Now, besides dodged bar graphs for a contingency table, we can also think about stacking the bar graph. It's exactly what it sounds. Instead of looking at bars side, we just stack them on top of each other. In this case, what we're doing is we're just representing the cells of a 2x2 table of counts as different bars. So in this case, we're creating a stacked bar graph in which we're chunking our data into those who didn't survive and did survive, and then we're plotting as within each bar the number of counts for those in the different classes. So you can see here that, again, the greatest sort of area represented by the graph is given by those in the lower class who didn't survive. That just reflects the same information in a dodged bar graph, but sometimes a stacked bar graph can be more informative or just a more concise way of visualizing the cells of a 2x2 table of counts. We can also look at a stacked bar graph by just chunking the class. So we're looking at class first, and then within each class level, we're looking at the number of counts who did or did not survive. Again, all we're doing is we're representing the cells of a 2x2 table, and you come to the same conclusion, which is that most of the people in our data set are in those in the lower class and those who did not survive the Titanic.